Hello. If you couldn't already tell, I decided to bust out the old microphone for this video since the audio in my last one was very quiet. I'm sorry about that. But anyways, today I wanted to talk about employment, I guess, or, the I don't know. Words are escaping me right now. Hopefully, as I talk a little more, I'll get in the zone and start piecing this together. But I'll start this one off with an anecdote. A few months ago, probably like in the spring of this year, I was hanging out with one of my friends, and this particular friend, me and them have had a number of really nice conversations just about life and societal happenings and spirituality and also stuff that's happening tangibly here. But that's besides the point. The conversation we were having at this point in time was about work, and about how, currently in the year 2026, it's been very difficult for people like me, college students, college graduates. It's been difficult for people like us to find employment of any kind, but especially employment that matches, whatever it is that we're trying to build a career in. And we were talking about this for a little while, and then we got onto the subject of, I had started talking about how I think it's a little silly, the amount of value that we place on having a job, the amount of pressure we put on people to have a job and to have a career and all of these things. And the two of us, me and this friend, we had some good points in this dialogue. But I've been thinking about that conversation again, a lot more recently, because the job market has not gotten any better, at least not to my knowledge, or experience. And yet, it's like we bear with me through these long pauses. These videos are totally unscripted and impromptu. But there's a lot of shame that people, society feels towards individuals who are not employed. There's a lot of, unless you're in a comatose state or seriously mentally impaired, you best be working, or else, what are you doing with your life? What are you, you don't have a job, you're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to do anything with your life if you're not employed. It's unemployed people are lazy, or they're, moochers, and all these things. And that doesn't sit right with me. I carried that mindset up until my adult years, because obviously I was a kid parroting what other people around me were saying. I was like, yeah, I know, people can't, get a job. It's not that hard. Just go to work. But I'm older now. I'm wiser. And this might be a bit of a hot take, but I'm going to brave it and post a hot take to the internet, and I guess we'll see what happens. I don't think everybody should have to work. I think that if someone simply does not want to, and they don't see that for themselves in their life, I think those people should have the right to not work, and not only should they have the right to not work, but they should have the right to live. They should have the right to eat. They should have the right to drink. They should have the right to healthcare. And I know that surface level opinion is a little far-fetched, because, of course, there are plenty of people who refuse to get a job because they refuse to accept any sort of responsibility. There are people who refuse to get a job because they, maybe it is, genuine laziness or genuine, entitlement, whatever it is. But there are also a lot of people like me, who want to do things with their lives. I want to travel. I want to help people. I want to be, self-sustaining. I want to create, and I want to share my creations and all of these things. I do plenty of volunteering. I love to volunteer. But the moment you tack a salary onto any of that, I don't know. Something about it just changes for me. And with that, I think people equate being employed to having a purpose, or people equate being employed to being a responsible adult, or there's a certain notion that okay, if someone has a job, they're doing something right. They're doing something major and something really important right. But why? Why do we think that about employment? It's because, being employed, it's not the thing itself, it's what the thing implies. And I love saying that about literally everything ever. Is you got to look at the implications of the thing. So with employment, let's say, someone's working a stable job and they make a good income, all that. What is good about that? It's good that they show up, that they have these responsibilities, that they are building skill sets in, whatever ways the job is building their skill sets. They are getting out. If you work from home, that's a little different. But, if you're going to an actual job site, you're getting out, you're interacting with people, you're doing these things. Obviously, making money from your job is something that is valued as well, because then that money pays for your bills. If you have a family, you use that money to help take care of your family. So on and so forth. And all of those things are good. But I don't think you need a job to do all of those things. Most of them. The only thing that that requires a job, well, even then, people make money in all sorts of ways that are not through a legitimate job. See drop shippers on Amazon, see Depop resellers, see people who gamble on FanDuel and all those sports betting or prediction markets, whatever. Yeah, so the only thing that you need, the only thing that you can, how do I word this? Out of all those things I listed, the only thing that you can only get from a job, kind of, is the money. Responsibilities, you could be a full-time student, and you're learning, and you're going out, and you're doing stuff. You're using your existence in some way. You can provide or I think of, people who are very self-sustainable, they live off the land, or they do all those things. And then it's you don't need a job for that if you're cultivating your own livelihood. But what this video it's very much a ramble. I don't know. There's no coherent or concise point I'm trying to get to. It's just thoughts, food for thought. But if you look, we as a society, we place so much value on the career and on the job. And I just keep seeing in my mind, okay, so there's someone who is spiritually deficient, spiritually void, has barely taken any time to explore who they actually are as a person, has barely taken any time to develop themselves emotionally, socially, ethics-wise, morals, any of those things. But they have a well-paying job. They have a well-paying 9 to 5, and they go to that 9 to 5, and they show up, and they do what they're asked, and they make their money, and they're a fantastic employee. But everything else about their life is just lackluster, is void. Compare that to someone who is not employed, who writes and draws and makes music, who goes out to various public venues and engages with people and helps people and who assists people, someone who, they volunteer, like, with animals and with the environment, someone who is a student and they're in school, like, I feel like capitalist society is still going to place more value on the worker ant, the first person I described. And they're going to look at the second person. Well, that's all great, but is any of that going to get you a job? That's great that you like to make art, but does it pay the bills? That's great that you like to help people. Have you thought about becoming a psychiatrist and peddling pointless drugs to people who simply need support and a family and financial stability? You know what I mean? Like, it's just sad. And I think, too, like, so many beliefs that are widely held by modern Western society. So many people who hold these beliefs and who, spout them are completely unaware of our place in the grand scheme of things. Like, people who conform to societal expectations, people who hold certain beliefs or who do certain things because that is the thing that other people believe. That is the thing that other people do. It's the socially acceptable thing. It's the expected thing, whatever. And it saddens me just how people fail to recognize that society is ever-changing. What is acceptable, what is applauded, what is punished, what is ostracized, all of that changes. And it has changed, and it will continue to change. Because society is a reflection of the individuals living in it and vice versa. Right? There's a word for that. There is a word for that. Symbiosis? No. Maybe? It's one thing affects the other thing, and the other thing also affects the thing back. I don't know. There's a word for that, but I digress. And so when people act in certain ways, or they believe certain things, or they express, certain ideas, and they're so certain of this thing, but then you ask them why, and then it just goes back to like, well, because that's the way society functions, that society needs this, or this is how we were, blah, and it's like, yeah, sure, that's how this particular society views things as of today. Who knows where we're going to be in a year? Who knows where we're going to be in 5 years, 10 years? People are so certain about specific ways of life. People are so certain, no, you have to get a job. Like, you have to be employed because that is the respectable thing. That is the goal. You have to start a family because that is the respectable thing. That is the goal. You have to, go to college because that is the respectable thing and that is the goal. Now, look, I love going to, like, I love getting my education. I'm a college student. I love that. And I think there's so much value in getting an education and a higher education. I do. But it's not for everybody. And that's fine. The people who college is not for, they're not lesser, they're not stupid, they're not lazy. It's just not for them. Because there's 8 billion people and counting on this planet, and we're all so very different. And I think that now that we live in this world that is hyper-connected and densely populated, all these different societies, like, I feel like we're trying to go about uniformity or trying to go about forming a collective, but not in the most effective way. We're trying to fit people into boxes. We're trying to fit people into categories. We're trying to, there's so many blanket statements. There's so many, like, I don't know, or people forget that just because something is weird does not mean it is bad. There are plenty of things that are not common and that are weird, but they're not harmful. And vice versa. There are things that are proliferated throughout our country that are so normalized, and yet it's so bad for you. I mean, look at all the food that people are eating in America, how processed it is, how poisonous it is, how not connected to any actual food it is. But it's normal. It's the normal thing. People aren't going to look at you weird if you're eating a bag of Doritos in the subway. They're not. Even though it's so bad for you. But a lot of people, I think, fail to make that distinction, that just because something is socially acceptable at the time does not mean that it is an absolute law of how humanity should live, how we should conduct ourselves. And so, yeah, I mean, going back to, like, employment and careers, if someone has a passion, and I've got plenty of friends, they have passions. I have a friend who wants to be a teacher. I have a friend who is gung-ho about being a janitor, a custodian, and they want to be the supervisor, and they want to build their life doing that work, and they love it. They love their custodian job at the high school they work at, and I'm so there for it. It's like, yes, like, love your job. That's what matters the most. There are people who want to work and who that is, what they see for themselves, and I wholeheartedly support and encourage that. But there are also people, free spirits, artists, whatever you want to, philosophers, I don't know. There are just people who don't see themselves doing that, who don't see themselves turning their gifts into capital, who don't see themselves submitting precious time and attention to something that they don't really feel fulfills them, but it pays the bills. I think that if there are people who they want freedom, like true freedom, to just exist, I know I see these vagabonds and these travelers who have barely any material possessions and they just go wherever. I love that for them. But there's people like that who exist, who just want to exist and, like, go places and, like, try things and do stuff and not be tied back to, like, employment or that social role. And I think that that's fine. It's fine. If there are some people who do not want to work a salary job, wage job, I think that there should be more options for what those people can do with their lives if they don't want to be employed. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Because, I mean, maybe a lot of people think so right now in this society that we live in because these are the beliefs that we've been taught. These are the values that we've held. But you go back through the centuries and the millennia, and, like, there were plenty of societies that flourished that were not capitalist societies, that were not societies that placed all value on how much money you make, or your professional qualifications, and they made it work. They made it work. We can make it work. We really could. And yeah, I just think that, and I understand why people conform. I understand why people, they want things to be done a certain way, or they make a blanket assumption about, you have, I keep failing to come up with specific examples, but I know that they're in there somewhere. Yeah, but, because people, whether they, they don't know any better, it's all that they've been taught, is this is how you do things, this is where you go, this is what you do, and that's what it is, that's their life. There's people who, the whole thing with, categories and boxes, okay, person, person is not employed, therefore a person is lazy. Everyone who is unemployed is lazy and is not working hard enough or is not setting out, like that sort of blanket statement. Or, I am neurodivergent, and there are plenty of, person cannot do this, therefore person is insert negative trait. And humans, I understand that mechanism, making the blanket assumptions, because that's what saved our species for thousands and thousands of years. You go back to, the Stone Age, you go back to where our brains are still kind of wired to be, and yet we've advanced this far. It's no wonder everyone's having a mental health crisis. Our human brains we are not caught up to what we're living yet, biologically. We're really not. But you go back to, the Stone Age, you go back to our hunter-gathering days. If you see a big tiger, you're just going to assume that tiger's dangerous, and you're either going to go kill it or you're going to hide. You're not going to take the time to, go up to it and maybe pet it or, maybe try a little bit. Oh, hey, are you nice, kitty? You're not going to do that because it's about survival. You got to make those quick decisions. And so in today's world, we still have that hardware of wanting to make these blanket statements. We still have that survival instinct, except we're not in small hunter-gathering clusters anymore. We're nations. We're continents, all connected, all talking to each other, all interacting with each other. And so now the thing that saved us for such a long time, and still can in some circumstances, it's now, I feel, limiting us or dividing us. Here's another hot take. I don't trust the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistics Manual, the thing that, the psych world kind of heralds as the Bible. Once you start treating anything like the Bible, it's going to go wrong. You take, it's all literal, that's a whole separate thing. But I don't trust the DSM. And it is precisely because of what I've been talking about, that society is ever changing, the norms and the beliefs are ever changing. You look a couple iterations of the DSM, you look at what it was, I don't know if it was DSM 3 or 2, I don't remember. For a while, DSM classified homosexuality as a mental disorder. Because for many years, and at the time that iteration of the DSM came out, people saw homosexuality as a mental disorder. They didn't have the research or the language or the understanding to see it as anything but. So the DSM was a reflection of societal standards and societal beliefs. It is the same now. There is an official diagnosis that you can get called prolonged grief disorder, and I do not remember the specifics of the criteria, but as I remember it, it's if you experience grief in a debilitating way past a certain time frame, then you have prolonged grief disorder. We're taking grief, one of the most complex, the most personal, the most unstable emotions a human being can feel, and we're assigning a timeline to it, we're assigning a diagnosis to it, a clinical set of criteria to grief? Do I need to explain what's wrong with that? And so, the other things in the DSM, I don't agree with, because I just see it as a reflection of where we are as a society, and where we are with our scientific understanding of things as well. But even science is constantly changing. We are constantly discovering new things that completely shatter our previous worldviews that we might have held so firmly for many, many years. But science, too, we're always finding new things that just totally reshape. So I don't trust things like the DSM because it's trying to make something so ever-changing, something pretty abstract, and very individualistic, how people experience certain symptoms and how people experience trauma and things like that. We're trying to lump all of that up into these neat little categories and these neat little boxes while simultaneously trying to say, everyone's different. But also, if you're different in this way, or if you're like too different, then we're gonna put you in a box and you're actually disordered now. You're not just different. Like, it's bothersome. It's frustrating to me. But yeah. Okay, this video is already getting kind of long. But I don't know. Again, this is totally unscripted, just me talking about stuff I've been thinking of recently. Food for thought. I'd love to hear any of your opinions, insight, experiences in your personal lives with any of this. I'm always curious to hear. Just keep it respectful, please. But yeah, all right. Happy Tuesday, and I'll see you guys again in the next video. Bye.